The highly anticipated The Northman has now been released, and while many enjoy the movie, many more, who maybe were expecting something along the lines of Braveheart or Gladiator, left the theater with questions about what they just saw, ranging from is this based on a real story to were the Vikings really that high on acid? If you had any of those questions, this is the video for you, as we're about to go through the basics of The Northman, including how closely the story matches written history, how accurate the clothing and armor is, and finally, what is up with the trippiness and all the Viking mysticism. Anyone who ever read Shakespeare in school may have spotted some similarities between his play Hamlet and the story in this movie. So, is The Northman an adaptation of Shakespeare's Hamlet? Not as such, no, but there is obviously a connection. Many of Shakespeare's more famous plays weren't original stories that he wrote from scratch, so much as they were his stage adaptations of earlier written records. This was the case with Hamlet, which was Shakespeare's stage adaptation of the by then already well-known legend of Amleth. Tracing back the legend of Amleth, the earliest and one of the more authoritative of the still extant sources for it is found in Gesta Danorum, which was written down by Saxo Grammaticus in the early 13th century. But Saxo Grammaticus didn't invent the story from scratch either. His ultimate source was most likely a 10th century Icelandic poem, which he would have had access to at the time, but which since has been lost to history. This now lost Icelandic poem would have been the oral record of the actual historic events behind the legend of Amleth. For all intents and purposes, you can consider the story in The Northman to be an artistic reconstruction of these historic events, retro-engineered by Icelandic writer Sjön and director Robert Eggers from the various written sources of the legend of Amleth that do survive to this day, and with a hefty dose of both Norse mythology as well as Norse magic and mysticism infused. The story of The Northman, then, follows the young Prince Amleth and begins with his father King Aurvandil returning from a raid. Aurvandil takes young Amleth to a rite with Heimir, who serves as both jester, advisor, and what can best be described as a shaman. In this ritual, young Amleth learns of Odin. He learns about the Norns, who weaves the destiny of all men, and he learns of honor and blood debt. He is also introduced to psychedelics, but we'll get back to that. Afterwards, King Aurvandil is killed by his brother, Fjölnir, in front of Amleth no less. Fjölnir also intends to kill Amleth, but he manages to escape. As he flees, Amleth sees Fjölnir seemingly have his way with his mother, Queen Gudrun, and remembering the lessons from Heimir, Amleth swears he will avenge his father, save his mother, kill his uncle Fjölnir, and by implication, reclaim his crown and kingdom. He needs to come of age first though, and so he is taken in by another pack of Vikings, where he grows up to be a berserker, the most fearsome of Viking warriors. The berserkers were known for using, well, shrooms to increase their aggression and prowess on the battlefield. And they were instantly recognizable for wearing bearskins, which is what berserker translates to. Though, as we see in the movie, a wolf hide would also do. Point being, they would assume the traits of the predators whose skin they were wearing. During a raid in Eastern Europe, where Amleth's pack are looking for slaves, or Slavs as the local population were called, Amleth encounters a vulva, a seeress, who reminds him of the destiny the Norns have spun for him, and what he must do. As that seems to have taken a back seat in the many years that have passed since his father was killed in front of him and his birthright stolen from him. But now filled with renewed resolve, Amleth learns that his uncle Fjölnir is no longer king, because shortly after stealing the crown from Aurvandil, he was himself deposed by Harald Fairhair, the first true king of Norway. You see, both Aurvandil and Fjölnir after him may have referred to themselves as kings, but seen from the outside, they were closer to chieftains over a limited geographical area. Harald Fairhair unified Norway into one realm under his rule by vanquishing these lesser kings and taking their lands. Thus, Amleth learns that he is no longer a prince and he will never be a king. But he can still avenge his father, rescue his mother, and kill Fjölnir. Upon learning that Fjölnir now has been reduced to a farmer and a slaver based in Iceland, he heads to Iceland, posing as a Slav. Here, he teams up with Olga, a Slav girl. Upon entering service, or rather servitude, in the household of Fjölnir, who obviously does not recognize him as his nephew, Amleth seeks out a shaman for spiritual guidance. This shaman presumably came with Fjölnir when he fled to Iceland, but he has no love for Fjölnir. Probably he was a trainee of Heimir, Amleth's father's shaman whom Fjölnir had killed, and he still possesses Heimir's decapitated head. Amleth now learns more of what the Norns have in store for him, a choice he will have to make, and how he is supposed to exact his revenge. And in a sequence inspired by some of the Icelandic sagas, but which also emotes Conan the Barbarian, Amleth wins the sword he is destined to use. From there, Amleth's destiny unfolds, and it is only a part of the larger tapestry in the Norse Tree of Life. Across the board, the level of accuracy to what we know of this period in time is remarkably high. From director Robert Eggers' previous movies, it is clear he is a stickler for accuracy, and by partnering up with writer Schön and consultant archaeologist Neil Price, he got it. First off, the necklace young Amleth was given by his father. This is actually an Islamic gold coin that his father would have come across on his travels. But these were so rare in the north that they were frequently put in necklaces and used as jewelry. Secondly, Aurvandil's hall. By all accounts, this wooden hall is very much in line with what the actual halls looked like, although some creative license may have been taken here and there. Virtually all of the costumes worn are accurate to the period, and this is true for the shields and weapons as well. I was only able to spot some armor here and there that was slightly out of place and time. One that gets a pass in this regard though is the helmet worn by the Odin stand-in, as this was a Germanic helmet from a few centuries before the movie took place. But it was associated with Odin, or Wodan, as the Germans of the time would have called him. And since we are on the topic of Odin, let us segue into the mysticism. The movie is filled to the brim with references to Norse mythology, magic, rituals and practices, but none of it is spelled out for you. But if you know it, you will recognize it, and even here, the accuracy is high. In fact, this is the most accurate representation of Norse magic and rituals that has ever been put on film. That is, some artistic liberty has obviously been taken for dramatic effect, and both rituals as well as some designs may have been, weirded up a bit for cinematic purposes. But the gist of it, very much so, is in line with what we know of the subject matter. Let's begin with the gods. The, for lack of a better term, patron saint of Amleth is Odin, the All-Father himself. Amleth is told of Odin during the first ritual when he is informed what his duties are in case someone kills his father. And years later, when Amleth's resolve returns in the aftermath of the Berserker raid. This is symbolized with a visual representation of Odin himself. Later on, when Amleth has reached Iceland and consults with the shaman there, Odin appears to him again, in the guise of this very shaman, male witch or whatever he may be. You see, the mythological Odin's advisor is the decapitated head of Mimir, and that is the image presented here. Another name that appears in Norse mythology is that of Fjölnir, Amleth's hated uncle. The mythological Fjölnir is one of the sons of Freyr, the Norse god of fertility. And indeed, the, for lack of a better word, patron saint of Fjölnir is indeed Freyr. It is therefore fitting that upon being deposed as a king, Fjölnir fled to Iceland to become a farmer, because the fertility that Freyr lords over also includes fertility of the land. The theme of fertility also informs the movie's eventual ending, where one's family tree would prosper and grow, and the others would be severed, leaving no question who had the blessing of Odin. Thus, the destiny that was weaved by the Norns came to pass. Speaking of, I don't recall seeing them in the movie, but for a visual representation of them, check out the Rammstein music video Zeit, which fittingly means time. The movie at times appears a bit psychedelic and trippy, and that's because our point of view character really was trippin'. Like all other shamans worth their salt, the Norse shamans used mind-altering substances, mostly mushrooms with psychedelic properties, to reach altered states of consciousness in which they could communicate with the spirit world. In the trippier parts of the movie, that is what you see represented. We first see this when the young Amleth, still only a child, is taken to the ritual with Heimir, and he is told to, drink this, with predictable results. Years later, as a berserker who has come of age, Amleth would also ingest shrooms before combat, so he would have encountered both Björk the seeress and the first manifestation of Odin while under the influence. Likewise, upon reaching the shaman in Iceland, before consulting with the decapitated head of Heimir and fighting the king of the mound for the sword, Amleth would also have been told to, drink this. Finally, as a good berserker, he would also have ingested some more shrooms before the final battle, which was also a bit on the trippy side for that reason. One of the themes hiding in plain sight in Egger's previous movie, The Lighthouse, was that the two isolated men were going insane from drinking ungodly amounts of that turpentine and honey mixture, and it would appear that a variation of that theme carried into the Northman as well. There is a lot to unpack in the Northman, and I'm sure I will find many more themes when I can revisit the movie in the comfort of my own home. For now though, I do hope that these observations of mine can help clarify some of the more out there elements of the movie, as well as its themes and historical references. In my view, The Northman is not only a highly entertaining badass action-adventure void of the message, it is possibly the most accurate Viking movie ever made, as well as a piece of great cinema. This is the kind of film that for better or worse sticks with you, and the kind of film you will come to appreciate ever more and more the deeper you go in dissecting its layers and meaning and subtext. This is a movie we will revisit, so to make sure you don't miss out, please hit that like, subscribe, and indicate you want notifications on all videos. Also, if you know anyone else who might appreciate this explanation of the movie, feel free to help share it in your social media. With that, let me know your thoughts on the Northman and your interpretations of it in the comments.